Hello, welcome to Books and Brews,
the place where beer and literature meet.
With your host, certified Cicerone Michael Agnew.
And Laura Mosica, author of the Bluebells Chronicles.
Each month we invite a guest author to read their words and talk about writing while sipping beers specially paired with their work.
This week's guest is Dr. Chris Powell.
So sit back,
pop a cold one,
and dive into some books
and brews. We will be ready to go. We are rolling.
We are.
Welcome. This is episode. What are we on? 22.
22. Yep, we're
episode 22 of Books and Brews podcast. Welcome everybody out there to our 5.5 million listeners.
5.5 million. What happened?
What is that less than we had before?
Million. Are you kidding? We were up to like 28 million last time, and I know we gained a few. So we're.
Oh, never mind. See, I haven't been monitoring our stats.
Yeah,
so.
You really should. I watch those stats like by the hour, and I believe that we are at about 32.1 million right now, but it's going to go up by the end of
the way you said that, Laura, it looked like you were actually looking at something and like you had pulled up something on the screen going, we're at about 32 million.
I stay on top of it. I'm watching the numbers tick on by, and in fact, on up by about another 15 just now.
Just now.
Amazing. Yeah.
Awesome. It's just
Yeah.
So what's new with you?
Everything, nothing. I mean, same old. I kind of sit in a house all the time and,
You're in a different location, though.
Different location, right. So right now I'm kind of between houses, but my house sold. So I was pretty excited about that.
Excellent.
And I sold it as is. I was kind of torn. Like, do I want to do all this work and fix it up and see how great I can make it? But there's so much else going on that I sold it as is, and somebody else gets to have all that fun. And I'm just in the last stages of cleaning out 17 years, 9 kids, and I lost track of how many pets have been in that house. And it's been quite a job, but just about done. So, and another one of my sons went off to boot camp, so that's 2 in the military now.
Wow.
So, you.
I had nothing going on still.
Yeah. What about the banjo?
That I've got going on. Playing like an hour a day.
Wow.
Yeah. Except for those few days. So it's funny because, and this is probably normal, particularly for somebody who's like just starting an instrument, but there are some days when the practices are like great, I'm fast and I can just play those songs. It's like rolling along. And then there are other days when my right picking hand becomes just a ball of mess. And all 3 fingers just do their own thing. And sometimes they just quit doing anything at all suddenly.
You need another musician here. Yeah.
Awesome.
You play banjo, do you?
Not yet.
Just not yet. Not yet. Like a true polymath there. Yeah.
Like I'm saying, I'm sure that's a normal thing for people just learning an instrument, but it can be extraordinarily frustrating when all of a sudden my right hand just doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I tell my students is we expect learning to be like this, like straight up, and it's not. It's you go up and you plateau and you go up and then you seem to drop and then you shoot up and then it's like you crash and overall it's upward, but day by day it can be kind of up and down.
So that happened. It was really funny. So the first song, which Masako, my girlfriend, is getting really sick of that first song because we've been playing it for a year and it's not a particularly complicated song. But that first song, early on, I had got so I could play. So on the CD that I play along with, the accompaniment CD, it has multiple tempos. The fastest tempo being 106 beats per minute, which is
106.
Pretty damn quick.
No. That's slow.
Well, I mean, when you're picking 3 fingers all at once, and it's pretty fast.
I got in trouble with the priest when I played in the church choir because I wanted to do everything fast.
Yeah.
director was always slow down. Like, we're at 120. Isn't that slow enough? Play.
But I had early on, I'd gotten so that I could play it at 106 and play it pretty easily at 106. And then all of a sudden, something happened. I don't know what, but I could hardly play it at all.
It was this
so I had to drop back down a couple of tempos and building myself back up, but I still can't play it at 106.
Which song is it?
Boil Them Cabbage Down. That's the first one. But I know 4 songs now.
Very good.
Soon it'll be, Foggy Mountain Breakdown, and you'll be right up there.
I've been watching YouTube videos, and I've been watching one that breaks down Foggy Mountain Breakdown by every lick. And so I always do like a half an hour of just right hand drills before I start practicing the songs. And one of the drills is the Foggy Mountain Breakdown roll. And so I've been watching and trying to add if you fret one and then hammer your other finger down on the next fret, that's called a hammer-on. And it's the Foggy Mountain Breakdown is that one lick with a couple of hammer-ons thrown in. So I'm trying to learn to do it with the hammer-ons. I can play the lick really fast, but then you add the hammer-ons and all of a sudden it's like you've never played it before.
Isn't that frustrating? Well, have you read some books then?
No, I haven't read any books.
I kind of half covered you then. I've been working on The Island of the Day Before by Umberto Eco, and it's a strange book, but it's inspiring me to want to go look at the history of the 1600s and all the wars between Spain and France and who was fighting who. It's a really interesting book, but it's thick. And then I actually started last night on 40 Thieves of Saipan, which we will be talking to that author next month.
Yeah, I'm a little ways into that.
Oh, are you really? Okay, good. How do you like it?
It's good. It's really interesting.
Yeah, very, very telling. So, guess who we have with us today?
Who do we have with us today?
I could never ask. Today we have Dr. Christopher R. Powell. He is an author, poet, musician, engineering and management consultant, and aspiring polymath with his fingers on everything from fretboards and ivories to the pulse of postmodernism, surrealism, and nihilism's impact on the destruction of morality and sanity. And that's actually a very interesting connection, which gets into some of his writing. His work takes him from the Internet of Things to cyberspace and from supercomputers to AI. More down to earth, he putters in his lab with birdhouses and cameras, servomotors, and drones. At the range, he's comfortable with ARs and lasers, in a kilt with trombones and guitars, on a kneeler with his rosary, and in the kitchen making omelets and Long Island iced teas for his love. I'll tell you a little bit about his book before we get going. Powell's book has been described by Kirkus Reviews as having certain similarities to Joan Didion's 2005 Year of Magical Thinking, which investigated the nature of grief. But Dr. Powell's book investigates the nature of illness itself. He meticulously details his late wife Bonnie's every procedure and symptom and every failure of modern medicine to provide her with relief. He also applies the same method to his own emotions and spirituality, presenting engaging, admirably honest deductions regarding sacrifice and dedication in this powerful, heartbreaking memoir. So, welcome to Dr. Christopher Powell. If it's okay, we'll call you Chris.
I think that's more than enough.
That's more than enough. All right. What's our first beer?
First beer is from Boulevard Brewing Company in Kansas City, Missouri. This is called Manhattan Social Club, and it is a beer inspired by the Manhattan cocktail. The reason I chose this one is because, I'll say the readings today were really hard to pair to.
I imagine. There we go. I like the bottle.
Yeah, it's nice. But the reason I chose this one is in reading through this first reading, I found myself putting myself into the position of the writer, and thinking, Good Lord, I would need some cocktails to kind of unwind from this situation. So I wanted a cocktail inspired beer to get at that idea of I need a drink right now.
Mm-hmm.
This wasn't the cocktail inspired beer I wanted. There was another one that I had written about in the Star Tribune a couple months ago, but it wasn't available anymore. So it was an old-fashioned inspired beer. But I chose this Manhattan inspired beer because it was the only cocktail inspired beer I found.
Okay.
So cheers.
Oh, cheers. What do you think? Do I like it or not?
Well, I can tell you before I say I do not like it.
Really?
I had one last night and I couldn't get through more than about a quarter of the bottle, maybe, before I dumped it out.
That's unusual for you to say.
It is. I don't know. Something about it doesn't.
I can see where you wouldn't like this, though. It does not taste like a beer. But I do like it. I think this is great.
I find this very nice.
I think this might be a first that I like a beer and you don't. Has that ever happened?
It probably is. I thought you might like this one because it's super malty.
I would totally buy this again. This is probably my top 3 to 5 of all the ones we've done. January.
So the description doesn't say much about it. I can guarantee you it's aged in a whiskey barrel.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it might have some rye in it, like rye malt. And it's strong, 12.5%.
Okay.
Ah, yes.
Reminds me of your story about the frat boy.
Exactly.
Yeah, it tastes like it would be high in alcohol content.
Yeah. So,
are we ready for your first reading?
Sure.
And this is from the Path That Shines. So this is actually, I'll make a comment about the cover that I'm holding up for those who are watching the YouTube video. This cover, the word polymath is sort of, same as saying you're Renaissance man. This is actually a painting that Chris did. And so in the original painting, I believe, was this circle just black?
Yes, it was. Mm-hmm.
And so in the original painting, the circle was a single black circle, and he turned it gold and then made 2 to represent wedding rings.
Mm-hmm.
So that is The Path That Shines by Chris Powell. Go ahead.
And this is from chapter 7 of the book. So we're firmly into the medical journey at this point. September 2nd, 5:26 p.m. Bonnie is now home. She was discharged today with a few more meds, but glad to avoid hourly blood glucose checks, continued IV, and other very annoying aspects of daily life in the hospital. Her platelet count is now up to 68,000. This is above 50,000, an important level, and far above the low 30s where it was for a while. Normal is closer to 150 to 450,000, but we'll take anything above 50. This shows the IV immunoglobulin is working. A few labs this week, outpatient, and some follow-up doctor visits, but we're all happy to have her home. Zena is especially happy and keeps staring at Bonnie from her station near the fireplace. Thanks for your continued support, and we look forward to staying out of the hospital now. Smiley face. Okay, some good news for a change. In my journal entry, I reported that the IVIG is working. In actuality, we could really only commit to maybe working, but her counts have been down so low and for so long that to see any progress seemed to be a good indicator that the change, in this case the IVIG, was helping. Her production engine was working, her count was coming up, and we seemed to be preventing destruction, whether it was through hemolysis, which is the physical destruction of cells in the spleen, or an overactive immune response, or the immune system invalidly identifying proteins on cell surfaces throughout the body, latching onto them and chemically or biologically destroying the cells. September 2nd, take 2, 9:34 p.m. Nurse Hubby reporting for duty. Evening prescriptions, check. Blood glucose, checked and recorded, check. Postprandial insulin, check. Sub-Q heparin doses, check. Kinesiology tape, trimmed, cut, shaped, and stretched onto the right arm edema, check. Peritoneal dialysis setup, complete, check. PD transit, cleaned and prepped for connection, check. PD initiated, check. Repeat twice daily for foreseeable future. Check. Sigh. It's good to have her home, though. First on the list, celebratory dinner at Applebee's for Bonnie, complete with substantial dose of PO, or oral, beer for the nurse. Smiley face. Remember that fear back in July when she got back from her first strokes about an accident happening in the house, about every possible thing going wrong? It's back. But this time it's countered with the assurance that I got through it before and I can do it again. And in this case, we're starting a couple of steps ahead because her rehab from this stroke has already gone really well. Some question marks about the immune therapy, but initial positive indications, so far, so good. September 4th, 3:28 p.m. Bonnie continues to rest and unwind from the stressful hospital stay. Med compliance has been and remains an ongoing issue, but she has a couple dozen meds delivered at different times of days and with different routes, shots, pills, suspensions, etc., so it is a lot to consider. Attempting to think up novel ideas to improve compliance, at least for the 6 to 8 injections she needs per day. I only need to do sub-Q. Hey, I'm really getting this medical lingo down. Sub-Q injections are subcutaneous, done just beneath the skin. You don't have to go deep into muscle or find a vein. The medical compliance, we really don't want to be back in the ER. The nausea was the toughest thing. The anti-nausea meds, either pills or tablets that dissolve under the tongue, really don't do a great job on serious nausea. Bonnie could barely choke down a sip of water, and huge pills required a significant gulp or a whole glass. She had always had a strong gag reflex, so she would tend to take her pills with her chin down, gulping down a whole lot of air, gagging away. Talk about an excellent way to bring everything right back up. Water, pills, a bout of nausea, a stomach load of air. It was a miracle that anything got in and stayed in. Frequently, it did not. So the major episode shovel might be put away in the garage, but the smaller, gee, I wonder if she's getting enough meds to keep her out of the ER shovel was tucked away right under the bed.
Yeah, I think we need cocktails just listening to it. Very, very hard time. We have a theme because it's going to be released in February. We have a theme of love. And, there's deep and genuine love lost in this through your readings, actually. Love lost, love gone wrong, love found. It's often said that love is the most written about subject by poets, novelists, philosophers. But a lot of that writing really focuses on the good times. And yours in this does not. It's focusing on a very tragic time, on a time of sacrifice and the actions that love can require that are not happy or fun. Why do you think so few writers write about that aspect of love?
Well, I think, it kind of comes from the root of those words. The idea of a sacrifice, sacre plus facere, making or doing, and the idea of sacrament, the idea of obligation or allegiance, or sacrare, consecrate. This is the meaning of marriage, and the idea of what you say, I do, that is the making or doing. And, it is that obligation that, as Bonnie was trying to stay alive in this world for me and Emily, our daughter, I was obligated to get her through this struggle as well. And that was the reason I was really trying to write this book, was to document that mutual obligation, that sacrament to each other, through that. And you're right, that really is the difference that we see in a lot of love, the so-called love, and the reason the divorce rate is so high, 50% or higher, that this is a very different kind of aspect of love that I wanted to document.
So define the shoveling and the shoveler. That I don't think you mentioned it in this reading, but throughout the book you talk about the shoveler. What is the shoveler and the shoveling?
At any given moment, as I document in the book, there were literally 12 serious illnesses and 12 different specialists that Bonnie had at any given stage, any one of which an axe could have fallen and literally almost killed her overnight or immediately. And so there's this pit in your stomach where you're just worrying that something could happen at any moment. And it felt like a shovel was digging your insides out. And I personified that shovel as a shoveler, because you literally felt as if, at any given moment, your insides were just being shovel.
And this illness went on for what, 18 months, 2 years?
It was documented in 1992 with kidney failure, and then in 2012, it was actually labeled as antiphospholipid antibody syndrome, and she passed in 2013. So yes, about a year and a half to 2 years.
Okay.
It was
so long time to deal with that. You're one of our few guests who has written memoir, which is classified as creative nonfiction, and it's very different from the academic writing you've previously done. For listeners, you have a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD, and MBA. Did I forget anything?
Serial student. I just can't stay out of school.
So you've done a lot of academic writing, and this is very different. And I'd say most of our guests kind of are drawn to writing for writing's sake. It's like something they can't not do. But you came to it with some very different reasons. What were your reasons for writing this book that drew you to this kind of writing?
Definitely three main reasons. One was grieving. This was a cathartic process for me in getting through my, the loss of my wife after 24 years. One was to describe an awful illness that really the medical field doesn't know very well. Antiphospholipid antibody syndrome was actually only documented starting in 2001, and they really don't know very much about it, particularly in as serious a form as Bonnie had it. And one was to describe the story arc of Bonnie's legacy, the love, life, and strength in the fate of this tremendous struggle.
Why do you think, you're hardly the only one who's written about a difficult time. Lots and millions of people do it. Why is it so therapeutic to write about our hard times?
Yes, grief is something that takes time. And it's something that's also deeply personal and very, very deep inside of you. And it is, for me, that idea of literally writing down the words and also going through the long editing process was the thing that was able to lift it up and out of me. It's something at the time, of that part of my life was going to be something that, was certainly going to take a long time to do. And this was the perfect vehicle for me to be able to make it happen.
And I think you also had a goal of helping medical personnel deal with some of these things. Do you have some evidence that you've succeeded in that?
Not as much as I'd like. It's difficult to break into the medical literature field. I've had some interest from some folks, particularly in the nursing field, because, what I found was dysfunction in the medical, the actual doctor field, as they would argue with one another in front of actually Bonnie and me as to...
Which gave you a great deal of confidence.
Right. And then the nurses were extremely sympathetic, and they wanted to know, how to deal with this dysfunction. And so, I'm still working to see if I can, particularly in rheumatology and related fields, to see how we can introduce this book, into the curriculum somehow.
Right. I think you have a goal of getting quite a bit more widespread readership of this book.
Yes.
I think we are ready for beer number 2.
Okay, ready for beer number 2. This is a beer that I don't actually have in hand because when I was looking for beers yesterday, I did not have time to go to multiple stores.
Oh, no.
The way the beer industry is now, different stores do different things. So if you're looking for something particular, you might have to go from store to store to find it. And I didn't have time. But I know what I would have poured had I had it. So I would have poured a Belgian Lambic because this poem goes from something that was lovely to something that has soured. And a Belgian Lambic is very champagne-like. It's sparkling and wine-like, but at the same time, it's funky and sour because it's been fermented with various wild yeasts and bacterial cultures. So you have this thing that is sparkling and lovely that seems, it's delicious. So when I say it seems to have gone bad, I don't mean that it's really gone bad because it's one of the most sublime beers in the world. But something sparkling, lovely, and delicious that seems to have gone bad with this kind of infection, funk, sour. So a relationship soured, if you will.
Yes.
So cheers, even though we don't have it in our glasses.
Let's just put the glasses again out of principle, So
That's a superb choice. And did you happen to have a particular brand or type in mind when you were thinking?
No, it really would have depended on what was available, because when you're looking for those, availability is a little bit scarce. There are not often not a lot of choices.
I do love them, though. That's a wonderful choice.
Yeah.
And it is related to, the poem that is the second reading, as I found in my research, the idea of narcissistic codependency is very oriented to this deep shoveling also as something reaches very strongly into a person in an analogous way. And it's the reason I wrote this second poem, as I found it very, metaphorically similar.
Mm-hmm.
This is called From Love to Shame.
Yes. The cross I had carried has cut deep and hard. Each step down this road, each splinter, each shard. The shoveler dug deeper into me still, but beyond it there was more tragedy still. As I looked to transcend St. Peter's quill, another cross thrust upon these shoulders strong. Another journey with many steps long, mixed faith and folly with faithlessness tossed. My spirit, my heart, my soul nearly lost. And worse, my precious creation, my heart, this one so tiny an entry to this mortal part, emotionally burned and needlessly singed. Each day simple things with such venom tinged. This new love's cross I found firmly planted in ground, leaden and greasy with cords round me wound. It pulled me and dragged me in all sorts of ways, determining where to go, impossible most days, identity slipping, tracking wants and needs, mortgaged myself towards self-obsessed needs. Each seed sowed and planted, each vine a new weed, each weed a new cord round the cross, a new lead, each lead a new mood pulling this way and that. So the cross fell over, pounding me flat. Rise up each day to fall and fail again as new seeds, weeds, and leads told where I'm wrong and when. Where does one's soul go on a journey like that? Via Dolorosa, Golgotha perhaps? To revisit salvation, at least some purposeful way? No, this journey was baseless and senseless and needless and yet endless and looping with new ways to get. It started one day, sweetly enough, as such things do with shared interests and stuff. A smile and some sun, a walk hand in hand. Amazingly enough, we liked the same band. Coincidences abounded, shared faith at the top. Without this foundation, she knew we would stop. Marriage is life's center, she'd never been. I needed one to bookend perfection. Things in love went along, progressing just fine. Shamans and pagans along for the ride. Their hands on my shoulders, me always blind. My faith took a back seat, lip service it got. Nary a mass or confession, a rosary begot. Under one roof, three together starts the inevitable slide. The picking, the knits, the tatting, the clips. Every day there was something caused her mood to flip. The nearing, the fearing, the hiding, the stress. Just avoid, move away, get away from this mess. Some days wrecked on rocks within moments of starting. Some took more hours before finding monsters hiding. Every day, insides churning, awaiting the shoveler. I felt he was coming to take what's inside of me. Nothing was good enough. A snide must be nice if I tried to take some time off on my own, especially outside. Don't do that. You're a putterer. These books are a mess. All these problems I had, I just had to confess. After a while, it just becomes easier to withdraw from everything that makes me what and who I was. Because I've forgotten these things, since it's easier to cope by giving them wings and digging myself a deeper hole down to try to escape the self-obsessed hounding and pounding and trouncing my sense of self in my head and my heart and my spirit. The farther I go, the less I can hear it. I came near to soul's end in this endless despair as I sought refuge in a box with a lid and no care. I tried nailing it shut from everyone outside. I'm done now. Nothing's left, not even my pride. I'd always been jolly and full of good cheer. I'd been quick to find humor to fast raise a beer. Was there really shared interest, that band, really true? Whatever love's lost, and I'm coming unglued. And this cross had no noble purpose and no noble end. All the weeds had wrapped round me, all the hard parts hammered in. My energy was sapped. I was empty and lonely. I was done and done and done.
This was almost painful to listen to by the end. And especially, I think, Michael, between you and I, we know most of our guests personally, you know, to one degree or another, they're past friends. So I'm sort of familiar with your story. And yet to hear these two contrasted side by side, the self-sacrifice, the giving, the mutual support to this, it's painful to listen to. And it's another aspect of love that I think a lot of writers don't talk about. We might talk about unrequited love, but this love that just goes wrong, that becomes so destructive and so painful, dare I say one-sided. You know, and there's a lot of talk about narcissism, but this poem really digs into what it's like to live with that. Why do you think writers don't write more about that aspect of just love that completely goes off the rails and becomes destructive to one person?
I think because, really, in a nutshell, it's extremely personal. In this case, you can tell from what this poet is saying, it's caused deep harm and it's very difficult to express. I mean, this is really screwed very deeply into this person. And it's also very hard to just get those words out. And then when the person has released that, it's extremely personal. And, you know, why would someone want to speak to that? When the person has been damaged to that extent, it can be difficult to even just confess that damage, let alone admit to it and take ownership of it. Even to someone who's in such a relationship, so many of them have perhaps not even exited those relationships, let alone be able to say these things. So I think that's a significant reason, you know, for a lot.
You know, I think you bring up an interesting point, because I'm thinking back to my experience with somebody who was doing similar things, and it doesn't matter who, but there were a lot of people who can be very judgmental and very much, well, why don't you just leave? Why don't you just walk away? Why don't you just? And I wonder if that's part of the reason that people are afraid to talk about it, because people are going to go, well, you're the fool. Why did you even get involved in the first place? Mm-hmm. And that's a whole field of study. So the message in this reading obviously is very different from the first. How do the two connect?
Yes, you know, in my ongoing research, you know, I have found that relationships that are based in narcissism and codependency can produce similar situations where, you know, the spouse or partner is at the end of their rope, you know, and in despair and agony and needs to rise from, you know, from the ashes. So there is that descent and then that eventual transcendence. So there's a lot of parallels emotionally, spiritually, and even physically. You know, when a person is in such relationships, they need, you know, to get out and, you know, to rise. And, you know, I think even though the storylines are very different, one is based in blessedness and one is based in extreme despair, that still that aspect of shoveling, that aspect of needing to rise is a similar foundation. And, you know, I just find the parallels to be kind of striking in that regard.
Mm-hmm. This poem really reminds me of Billy Joel, The Stranger. Once I used to believe I was such a great romancer, then I came home to a woman that I could not recognize. When I pressed her for a reason, she refused to even answer. It was then I felt the stranger kick me right between the eyes. And I think this happens to way more people than we like to believe. How common do you think this is, that you wake up and you realize this person has put on a mask for you, and as soon as they've got you, boom, there's someone else? In
fact, I think it's very common. Carl Jung wrote a book called Archetypes of the Mind, where he speaks to this idea of personas, or this idea of masks, which people wear. And he spoke to this idea of persona, shadow, anima and animus, and self. And he actually spoke to a number of archetypal masks, such as father, mother, child, the wise old man, the maiden, the hero, and the trickster. And a number of these things can kind of permeate, a number of different, roles that people in relationships can play. And, we see this, I think, an awful lot in relationships, especially where there are people in dysfunctional relationships. Both the person who is dysfunctional can have a mask on, and then the person who has to deal with the dysfunction has to put a mask on in order to deal with that.
Mm-hmm. It's like I said, a fascinating study, much preferable to study it from the outside than the inside. Yes. But I think having been on the inside is what draws people to really dig into this and how these things happen. I really like the way you brought back the theme of the shoveler for this. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I've worked through in my own experience is that love should build us up. It should make us better. It should help us grow. And yet you speak in this poem of a love that just tears you down, hounds you, finds fault, and finally leaves you in utter depression. And I won't go into my experience, but it was at least that bad. And you make a reference to this in saying this cross had no noble purpose and no noble end. Can you speak to the dichotomy between the shoveling of caring for Bonnie, taking care of her, watching her suffer and ultimately die, and the shoveling of dealing with a narcissist?
Yes, it's really the shoveling as noble versus the shoveling as despairing, and when the shoveling is noble, it has a purpose. And even though I would wake up every day and still feel that shoveling, I knew that there was a reason and, that noble purpose. Whereas I think in my research about narcissism, when you see that shoveling of despair, it's only drilling ever downward for that person. And, what is the exit for that poor individual? We see that in those types of complicated relationships that there may not be an exit, or the exit, in fact, might be awful. And, that dichotomy, I think, is quite severe in that kind of a case.
One of the key aspects of this poem, From Love to Shame, is this sense of utter loss and hopelessness by the end of losing your sense of self. And by the way, one of the things I like about this poem is the way the very structure of it becomes, you can almost feel the rhythms becoming more chaotic as the speaker descends into this. What are some of the warning signs of losing yourself, of that you are in such a relationship?
Right. If you find that you're no longer engaged in activities and pastimes that you find, interesting or fun, regardless of what the narcissist or codependent person is interested in, and if that kind of begins to mortgage your identity, that's one key sign. And, if you find what I would call the visual analogy of seeing yourself in broken pieces on the floor, and then you find not only that those broken pieces are there, but you think that they deserve to be there, that identity of you really needs to be there. That's a very serious sign of the fact that you're in that kind of a relationship, and you really need to be getting out of that.
I think we are ready for beer number 3.
Ready for beer number 3. So beer number 3 is from Brewery Omegang in Cooperstown, New York. Brewery Omegang is an American brewery that specializes in primarily Belgian-style beers. This is called Chardonnay. It is a golden ale that is co-fermented with Chardonnay grape juice and then matured on oak chips. So fresh oak, not pre-used oak. The words on the bottle describe it as bright, elegant, and intertwined. For this next poem, it's kind of the opposite of the poem that you just read, like the flip side of that poem, where it is a coming together of things, of individuals in a way that is sublime. It's transcendent, even. I think you even use the word transcendent, if I recall. And so I was looking, oddly enough, for something champagne-like again. But this time, not that had gone bad, not that had soured. And so this is what I found, and I hadn't tasted it until just now, and it's delicious. It is everything that I hoped it would be. It is bright. It is champagne-like. It is a coming together of two different things, beer and wine. So for a little while, a couple of years ago, this was a trend, a growing trend in beers, sort of wine beers. It's since died pretty much. It didn't really catch on. But this is one of those. So beer and wine fermented together.
Did we have a similar one to this also from Omegang a few months
ago? Maybe.
Because I definitely remember the name Omegang, and I think we had something similar.
Might have.
Where it was a beer-wine combination.
Yeah, I know we had a beer-wine combination at some point in the past.
Yeah, I remember being at Total Wine looking for it, and that they had it. It was a long story, but anyway.
So this is everything that I had hoped it would be. It is delicious. This one
Cheers.
I really like.
Holding up to the computer here. Cheers. I like it or hate it. What's your guess?
Maybe it's not your favorite, but you don't hate it.
You are good. Oh my gosh, you know my beer taste so well. You nailed it. Yeah.
No, this is really good. You get it's really crisp and dry, sparkling, effervescent. You get hints of the characteristic Belgian yeast profile of kind of peppery, fruity. And you definitely taste the wine grape and the fresh oak as well. It is all the things that it says.
It's really interesting listening to you describe these, and then I want to taste it again and see if I can taste all of that.
And you will.
It's nicely done how the wine grape is balanced with the rest of the beer. They did a nice job.
This is called Psalm of Winged Transcendence.
Torn from my heart, and yet I tore, sent from you, Lord, of all hope, truth, and hope. The road seemed long, yea, longer still, yet shorter the path to love did I seek. The value taught through word and wisdom is patience first through life's travail, a yoke that is given to us light, a savior that is a gate and lamb. I turned away from an angel's guide pure to stay the course to God's white light. I thought I could see a shorter path to love's necessary place by my side. Alas, but not, this was not true. Vex and darkness followed me. While plying a troth away from truth, I was led to gnashing ruin. As angels do, she never left, but confused and hurt she was bereft. In a thin place, a hawk flown from God's side did start the healing needed to build love's heart. This harbinger from heaven's place wove threads across both time and space. The loom showed a fabric of many parts, a ministry and mission to touch many hearts. The hawk's threads reached me in mysterious ways. A call to play, a call to pray, a dream, a photo diary. Looking east to sun's rise daily, sitting in a sanctuary, a rejected library. Although in a sacrament's bond, I had entered into it clearly wrong. The more this angel's hawk brought threads, the more judgment must rend what was badly wed. What this loom's comb had finally started, and what my choices at first had discarded, my angel now came forth in brightness, with Raphael in healing and Uriel in lightness. Reaching into my soul in softness, what had become so pushed down and darkened, was now borne up by eagle's wings and hearkened to heaven an angel asking jointly as one, if I would leave behind what I had done. An eagle girded me to slake my thirst, for God's holy blessing to shed this curse. I reached up to angel and took her hand, the fabric of our mission growing as eagle's wings fan. Security, peace, and creativity follow. A swan family glides over as we walk through the hollow. A misty tableau on bended knee. We thank God in heaven for all he did see. A fabric that, if made years ago, if left to two people, could not be as so. But if left to God's wisdom and two people's prayers, and humility, yes, and occasional errors, When back over time we now look, messengers and helpers were in every nook. The hawk and eagle and visions and dreams showed us that nothing in life is what it seems. And now that the heavenly fabric is ready, our swans demonstrate that we are rock steady. We look back again and wonder aloud if it could have been different somehow. But God, we know, to you be the glory, and we are so thankful for the rest of our story. Amen.
I like this. It's nice wrapping up. You know, we go from two pieces that are really very tragic to hopeful, which we don't need those cocktails anymore. Now we need the champagne to celebrate. It's nice to finish up with seeing a life progression, you know, climbing up instead of going down. Why do you call this piece a psalm?
Because it's this ascent from despair has, you know, aspects of many of the same things that we find in a psalm, which includes lament. It includes royalty. You know, if you think about King David, King Solomon, in this case, we find angels. We also find thanksgiving and the sacred, of course. At its base, the word psalm actually means instrumental music. But the subtlety here is that the angel is instrumental in aiding, you know, our protagonist here to his transcendence. The religious foundation is necessary, for without it, the poor soul here would be in despair. He needed a lot, and his calling was truly godly, coming from many quarters of God's creation. We had many, you know, spirit animals here actually helping him in addition to the angel.
Why the angel in particular?
So, you know, angels are God's messengers. You know, in some weaker views of angels, you know, gods are like truly transcendent wisps. They're almost like, you know, one and done, basically the equivalent of an email. They're here and gone. Other views have them as more permanent. You can think of the archangel Saint Michael, for example, or Gabriel. In this poem and psalm, I kind of take the more permanent view because our lost soul needs a more permanent presence in this case.
You are also a musician, and you just referenced that psalms are often instrumental or typically instrumental.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit more about both the music you play and the music you write. In fact, you play multiple instruments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I like to play, especially the music I like to compose. You know, I play classical music, and, you know, I'm in the middle of writing right now a duet for alto trombone and alto flute. I also play very electronic music because I kind of literally, I feel the rhythms of the earth and space and technology. And, you know, I attempt to try to capture the colors of these in the electronic rhythms. I like art that's abstract expressionist, surrealist, and as these artists like Matisse and Magritte and Picasso and Pollock deconstructed line and color and shape and scene, I try to do the same thing with electronic music as well. And so, you know, these are kind of themes that I try to bring out as well, in addition to the very, very classical music that I absolutely love.
Right.
But I can't play well enough. You know.
I was about to say, I find this really interesting. Chris and I met some years ago, and one of the first things we discovered was that we are possibly the only two people on this planet who both play organ and trombone. For our, we're up to 3.2 million listeners because we added some because this show was so good. Well done, Chris. One of my life's, you know, prideful moments is that I got myself kicked out of organ lessons. And man, I hated organ lessons. I was so proud that my teacher said, "You are the most stubborn student I've ever had in 25 years." And I was 7, and I went, "Yes, I win." And I'm pretty sure my mother's never forgiven me, but I'm still about it, as you can see. Nonetheless, we're like the only two people on earth who play both organ and trombone. I actually have an organ in my house now with like 2 octaves of massive, huge wooden foot pedals. It's great. I love the organ now. But here you are, you're playing like organ and trombone, and then you go do all this electronic music. I mean, like, it seems a dichotomy again. So, but anyway, you do write music, and so hopefully someday like an orchestral piece too.
Yes.
You have a lot going on in your life. You have some inventions you're working on. You have several books you're working on writing. You have your job, of course, and tell us some of the things that are next for you as in music and inventions and writing.
Yes, so, in some of the inventions I'm working on, a garden robot that will roam your yard autonomously and tell you what flowers, should go where in your yard by interfacing with a GPS and the county extension. I've also got my book, First Principles, which essentially also goes back to essentially the nihilist philosophers of the early 20th century and actually connects with how we ended up with some serious psychiatric illnesses as a function of those nihilist philosophers and how that's impacted morality and its development over that time and calls us to needing to go back to some of those themes of morality and get away from what those nihilist philosophers were doing to us back then, which has, also caused us some serious problems. The actual problem that it caused us was actually schizophrenia. We actually didn't have the illness of schizophrenia in the mid-19th century into the early 20th century. And, these philosophers actually caused such an absence of feeling and, autonomy of individuals in this time that, it's very interesting what that impacted us for that.
I think one of the things, because, I happen to have inside knowledge, First Principles I find fascinating because it actually draws together the moral code from all sorts of faiths, belief systems all around the world and throughout history. What are some of those?
Yes, I go back to anything from, Babylonian times, Hindu codes, Egyptian. I even go to some of the more interesting ones such as Rosicrucian and, Templar codes and things like that, all the way through, modern codes as well, and bring it to the Ten Commandments, the Boy Scout Law, Bushido Code, and things like that, and find even George Washington's, 142 codes, for, good living, and relate all of them together and draw threads through them in order to make sure that, I'm being balanced with respect to cultural aspects and, making sure that it is extremely, intuitive as well, all throughout history, all throughout time, all throughout culture,
And I think what's fascinating about your book is that it shows that all through history, cultures all over the world, they all kind of come back to very similar concepts.
Yes, absolutely.
It's like it's inside us.
Yeah, it literally goes back 10,000 years. We've been, literally thinking the same things about what we should and shouldn't do. It comes right down to it.
Mm-hmm. And you have, you're working on theology of music?
Yes, indeed.
Yes, indeed. Disclaimer, we're working on it together, but we kind of have been for a long time and we need to get back to it.
Yes, but it's a relation of music, science, philosophy, culture, and history, all towards fundamentally relating to beauty coming from a very theological and godlike aspect of things, that there's a lot of common threads that fit together. And we have found that there is a lot of very interesting material that relates all these
Well, one of the things that I found really fascinating in my study of music is that it has an actual impact on our mind, on our emotions, which in a way you're like, oh, duh, of course it does. But if you go all the way back to Plato, the medieval times, they used all the modes. We've got 7 what are called modes. Today, we really only use major and minor, but going much back farther in time, they used all these modes, and Plato could tell you which mode would cause somebody to feel more sort of reflective, calm, peaceful, which mode would cause men to feel very, let's go to war, let's kill the enemy, what type of music, what mode you base your music, your composition on, has very direct impacts on the human body. It's either going to calm someone down or get them motivated to go to war, riled up, motivated, depending on your which side of the battle you're on. So there are a lot of fascinating things in that. And why don't you show us one of your other projects? You do some woodworking.
Yes, indeed. And I happen to have a hurdy-gurdy here, which the word hurdy-gurdy actually dates from an old Scottish term kind of meaning noisy or commotion.
Why didn't they call the trombone that?
Right.
Turn it around and show the buttons.
Yes. And so these are the tangents, which actually impact strings, which are, if I can open it here, let's see.
In the front there.
These strings are drone strings and chanter strings. So this is kind of similar to a bagpipe sound. What we do here is we turn the handle.
So it can be seen.
Yes. We turn the handle.
On the end.
That plays drone strings and the chanter strings, and we press these tangents, which then press against the chanter strings. While the drum strings are still playing. And so you get essentially a melody on top of the drums underneath, either in the key of G or D typically, although you can tune it to different as you want. And you would play different songs in medieval times, and people would throw you money, in the street or things like that.
I like that idea.
Right, definitely.
I should do that.
And
what's really interesting is you guys aren't hearing this. I'm on the other end listening over the internet. But when you push the buttons, it sounds like voices.
Oh, really?
So it's almost as if you have tape loops in there. And the buttons are cueing different tape loops, which I think is an instrument idea that you should look into.
What are the
kind of like a hand-operated mellophone or something?
Well, yeah. Well, I was just going to say that would actually be like a mellotron.
Yeah.
I actually have in my computer. But this is handmade actually from kit parts, and so I had a lot of fun building this, and it is a interesting addition to my repertoire of instruments at home.
Well, another episode done. We need to give our links. What are your links, Michael?
I am at aperfectpint.net and aperfectpint on whatever social medias I'm still on.
Yeah, I think you've gone off a little, haven't you?
We are at Books and Brews with Laura Vosica and Michael Agnew on Facebook, and Book Brews on Instagram. Laura, where you be?
Well, my I had a terrible August, as I mentioned before, and I let things slide. I lost my URL, but I still have bluebellschronicles.com and lauravosica.com, totally updated website, which I'm really happy with. And social media, laura.vosica.author at Facebook. Chris, where can we find you?
I don't have much in the way of social media, unfortunately, at this time. But if you want to reference our...
Yes, I believe there's a website called chrisandlaurapowell.com.
Yes, indeed.
That talks about some of your writings, some of your inventions, some of the music, some of our photography that we did a few years back. We had quite a sizable amount of photography. And anything else? No other links.
No other links from me, but
Okay.
I'm very honored that you had me on today. Very honored by the beer choices that you had from us, and just very much thanks that you had me on today.
Upcoming events, staring at the
No.
in COVID times.
I never had public events anyway, and now COVID times just means I have no events whatsoever.
I actually do have an upcoming event. I did put out Startled by Nature, the second annual Gabriel Sworn Poetry Anthology. By the time this is aired, the first internet reading will be done, but we have one coming up on February 6th at 6 p.m. And I will post those links on Books and Brews as well as on the Gabriel Sworn Facebook page. And next month we have Cynthia Kroc, who holds a BA in journalism and history from Marquette University, a master's degree from the University of Minnesota, and an MFA from the University of Southern Maine. She is almost as educated as you and more. The author of 5 novels, including the award-winning The High Cost of Flowers. We will be talking with her about the book she wrote with Joseph. She told me this morning by email how to pronounce this, and my musician's brain wants to say Tchaikovsky. I believe it is Tahovsky. And he is the son of the commanding officer of the 40 Thieves of Saipan, who are also known as Tahovsky's Terrors. The book is called 40 Thieves on Saipan, and the subtitle is The Elite Marine Scout Snipers in one of World War II's bloodiest battles. So I know I say this every month, but I'm really looking forward to this, in part because I do come from a military family. I grew up military. My sons are in the military. My brother-in-law is in the military. My nephew is. My life has been very much wrapped up in the military. And one of my sons is Marine. So I'm really interested to learn more about this World War II battle that was fought. So.
All right. Well, that sounds fun. Chris, I want to thank you for coming along with us. Thank everybody who is out there listening. This has been Books and Brews number 22. Thanks for tuning in. Cheers.